Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has raised eyebrows today. She's claimed that Labour would curb immigration by putting time limits on how long companies are able to import foreign workers in shortage occupations. Downing Street has also refused calls for Rishi Sunak to apologise, despite failing to reduce net migration, which, of course, has now risen to record levels. ONS data shows numbers rose to 606,000 last year, even after repeated government pledges to bring overall numbers down. We've heard it all. After the figures were released, here's what Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said about tackling the issue.
Well, net migration is far too high. This is placing intolerable pressure on public services, on housing supply, and our ability to integrate people into our country. The Conservative Party has made a promise to reduce net migration, and we're absolutely determined to do that. Well, we've made a very significant intervention this week, which will make a tangible difference, reducing the number of student dependents that come to our universities, because universities should be in the education business, not the immigration business.
Right, joining me now is international human rights lawyer David Hay and international security and border control expert Henry Bolton here with me in the studio. So I think it's quite interesting, and of course there's a lot of politics going on in this whole discussion, but Labour presenting themselves as being tough on immigration. We all know that immigration levels, mass immigration, started under the Blair government, don't we, Henry? Do you think the general British public will trust a word coming from the Shadow Home Secretary and the Shadow Prime Minister?
Only those people who want to, and I mean by that their own supporters already, because it's an easy stick to beat the Conservative government with, of course, because everybody's criticising the Conservative government. They keep coming up with promises that they're going to do X, Y, and Z with the borders and with immigration. They keep failing to do so, and so it's a very, very easy political win for the Labour Party to just throw this out there. What I'd like to see is every time that one of these Labour frontbenchers or even backbenchers says such a thing, OK, how? Where is the detail? Why are you going to be able to deliver this when the Conservative Party aren't delivering it? And I think there's a lot of work to be done on getting them to come up with a how. Yes,
it's easy to say you're going to do something, as we saw with David Cameron promising to get immigration down to the tens of thousands, and then actually doing it. David, Labour say they'd curb immigration by putting time limits on how long companies are able to import foreign workers in shortage occupations. What does that mean?
I mean, the difficult thing here is that isn't the issue. I think in terms of they are not the problems when people come here in for companies and one would say legally. So I think what you might see is that you've got the Labour Party realising that the Tory Party are effectively trying to weaponise immigration and trying to use that to win votes. And obviously they're doing a very bad job of that in terms of none of the policies are actually getting off the ground at the moment. So I think the Labour Party is looking at trying to steal their thunder, as it were. So, but I think attacking or looking at corporate immigration, which is not the area where there's that many overstayers, is perhaps a failed attempt.
It's quite interesting, Henry, because a lot of the discussion about immigration has focused on the impact on the economy. Mm-hmm. It seems to be that there is a consensus among most of the political elite, media elite, whatever you want to say, liberal, metropolitan elite, whatever word, that immigration has been an economic success story. Is it more complicated than that?
It's a great deal more complicated, Emily. Let's look at, for example, the money that goes out of the country, individuals sending money home. World Bank figures for latest ones for 2021 were 8.7 billion going out. Now, of course, then other people will say, yes, but students bring in sort of 44 billion. But what I'm saying is that it's not simple. 8.7 billion from the 44 billion. But also, they talk about doctors coming into the NHS. That's fine, and indeed, immigrant doctors do contribute to the NHS. But it's not quite that simple because, of course, when you've got an increase in the population of 606,000 net, you've got to provide more doctors anyway.
You need more doctors.
You do. I mean, the net, Emily, is a plus in terms of the additional doctors available, but it's not a straightforward calculation. Plus, remember, we're paying the money out not only to provide the asylum seekers with funding, but also all of the infrastructure and so on, all of the people, all the facilities that are in place to simply process all of these people coming in. Now, most of that does sit in the asylum area, but it's not a straightforward calculation. It's not simply black and white.
No, David, it does seem like we're on a running machine, a treadmill, that we constantly have to be keeping up with, demand in our public infrastructure by then bringing more people in from abroad and so on and so forth. And we're not concentrating on how to make our own country sustainable for the long term. If you were looking at the statistics that we've seen from the past year, where would you say where could we start cutting the numbers? Because, of course, people look at the things and they say, oh, worker visas, well, we need them for these shortages. Students, good for the economy. We want them to prop up our universities too. Oh, Hong Kongers, well, we need to protect them and they're good for the economy. Ukrainians, well, of course, we can't say no to the Ukrainians. So where do you actually, in practice, start cutting the numbers?
I think what would make sense, and something that the government hasn't, I don't think any government has effectively done, is target the largest number of people breaking the immigration rules. And those are overstayers. Those are people that come on student visas and overstays, not their families that come while they're legal, but people that come and overstay. And whether it's tourist or whether it's student visa or work visa, that's the biggest number. And presumably, if we had effective border controls on entry and exit, it's fairly easy to see who's coming in, who's going out, and who's here illegally, and then find them and then deport them in an appropriate manner in accordance with human rights law. But that's something that, I trained in immigration law a long time ago. It was a problem then. It's still a problem now, and it's not been addressed. Now, of course, that's not as, in terms of a policy and like I said, weaponising in immigration and xenophobia. That doesn't help the Tory party as much as people coming across boats does, and stop the boats campaigns and rattling sabres. But you go to the biggest number, address that first, and then move down. And that's something that isn't still being effectively done.
Well, I was up in Boston for our immigration special when the net migration figures were published, Boston, Lincolnshire, and it was quite clear talking to people that there were overstayers, let's just say, or at least that's what the locals and people in the know could see with their own eyes and knew for a fact. But Henry, I was just looking at an article that came up during the week, and this is another thing from the government that shows that perhaps they're not actually as keen as they say they are to reduce these numbers. They're thinking about giving teachers from abroad an extra £10,000 to come over here and teach in our education system. If we can't have enough teachers that are British in our education system, we are in a terrible state if we have to go to India and elsewhere to get teachers.
We're in an appalling state, Emily. And just, if I may, just quickly to address one thing that's been said twice now, that the government is weaponising immigration. No, there is a real and genuine concern out there amongst the public that immigration is out of control. It is not being managed effectively. And part of that is the numbers.
Can both be true?
Both can be true, but to an extent, and different areas of it. But people can see and feel the changes in their communities, and they hear the government making promises that the government fails to act upon or to deliver on. And therefore, of course, they feel that it's not in control. They are putting political pressure on any politician to deliver on this. Now, the other thing, though, on the training, which is really what you alluded to in terms of the teachers as well, not just healthcare and so on and anything else. But we have in this country a system which is not unique, but is certainly in the minority globally, in which we require so many of our nurses, our doctors, our teachers and so on to fund their own training.
Yeah.
HGV drivers, security guards, all of these people have to fund their own training.
Well, Henry, all of these things are coming home to roost, aren't they now?
So we've got a systemic problem that's a great deal wider than immigration, because if we are going to do that, then the people who want to go into the nursing profession in this country are disadvantaged, because if they do pay for that and they're lumbered with a student loan, then of course the salaries are a problem. They demand more income to because they've got to pay their student loans and so on. Whereas people from abroad, their training is funded by their governments. And then they can come over here, qualified, to do the job. So we've got a systemic problem that goes through our employment, through commerce, through business, through so many different areas of government. We've got to address the whole thing.
I think the Treasury is so terrified that we may see a drop in GDP if we were to cut immigration levels, and it might take a little while to sort of reset things and start training more people for these important jobs and cut these shortages, because as we know also we've got the double problem of a lot of British people not working.